In this video, we're going to be doing a tier list to see what's the strongest form of bending. So first off, we're going to start with all the sub-bending types, and then we're going to move on to the main styles of bending at the end and see where they rank compared to the rest. So first up, we've got lightning. It's a sub-skill of fire. It's way more rare in just Avatar more than Korra, but I think we're going to be doing most of these from the timeline of Korra since it's just more advanced. But in Avatar, lightning was only really used by, I think, Azula, Ozai, and Iroh. But in Korra, pretty much every firebender has lightning, I think. So this was way more powerful back in Aang's times, probably around A tier, but I think just because we're doing by Korra, I think it's probably more like B tier. But it might change later, we'll keep it there for now. So next up we've got combustion bending. This is similar to lightning in how it's really fast and explosive. I'm not sure which one is more lethal between lightning or combustion bending. It seems like combustion bending might be a bit more lethal just because it's more explosive and powerful. So it's probably above lightning. Actually, it does have the well, no, I guess they both have cooldowns and kind of charge up times. So I think combustion bending does win just because it's a bit more lethal, I think. So now we're moving on to the sub-skills of earth, which the first one is metal bending. So same thing with lightning, it was really powerful in Aang's times because it was only used by Toph since she invented it. But by the time you get to Korra, a bunch of earthbenders can metal bend, pretty much everyone on the police force can. So it was definitely stronger in Aang's times, but I think it did lose a bit of its power. It's still really strong. You can even do things like how Suyin bent the poison out of Korra, so that's another use for metal bending. I think it's probably A tier, because I think you could use it as armor against any of these things. Maybe not lightning though, but I do think it's just more versatile and more useful in a fight. So we'll keep it in A tier for now. Next up we've got lava bending. The only time we saw lava bending in Avatar was with Kyoshi and Roku. I don't think any regular bender could use lava bending until Korra's times with Ghazan and Bolin. It's kind of like a mix between fire, earth, and water. It's like a hot liquid earth, and it's really slow. I feel like it has a lot more to progress. Like, I feel like it could be really strong in the future, but it's not practiced by many people at the point that we saw it at. Roku destroyed the whole island with just lava bending, and Kyoshi separated that whole part of the country. So I think at the highest levels it is super powerful, but at the lower levels it's not super strong. But I think if we go by the potential of how good it could be, I think it might even be above metal bending, because metal bending is not that powerful in Korra times. I think lava is actually more powerful, so we'll put it at top of A tier for now, but it might move up or down later. Next up we've got mud bending. I'm not sure if it's a water thing or an earth thing, or I think it could be both, because I think Toph and Katara both mud bend at each other. It's kind of strong. I think it's like a good way for a earthbender to get around. Like, as you can see, Toph here, she kind of surfs on it. If you have like mud around, you can kind of just water bend as an earthbender, so that's kind of cool. So I wouldn't say it's super strong, but it could be useful in certain situations. I think I'll just put it as C tier. Next up we've got seismic sense. This is a sub-skill of earth. So this can't really be used like offensively. It's only really for just seeing strategy. I guess it can be used offensively if you plan your attacks with it, like how Toph can see everyone in that dust cloud. That could be really useful, and it's basically the how Toph sees, so it's really strong for her. It's not really comparable to other forms of bending since you don't really bend anything, you can just see, but I think in certain situations it could be really useful in a fight, more than mud bending, I think, so we'll put it bottom of B tier. Next up we've got sandbending. So the only uses we really see of this are in the desert with the sandbenders. I'm not really sure what is possible with sandbending. Toph seemed to not like it because it was too loose and she couldn't really use it well, but I think the sandbenders have learned how to use it well. I'm not really sure where it ranks. I think it's probably around mud bending too, so we'll just put it in C tier. Next up we've got spirit projection. This is a sub-skill of air, and it's kind of similar to seismic sense in the way that it's not really a form of bending, but you can use it in like strategic ways. It's either the same level as seismic sense. Well, no, because you can't really do it like on the spot, so you have to kind of meditate for it, and I think that is really a downside to it. So I think probably D tier because it can't really be used in a fight, like mid-fight. So yeah, I think that's the worst sub-skill of any bending. Next up we got Flight. Flight on its own is not very good. You can't really attack with it, you can only just run away from things. But paired with Airbending, it could be decent. I still do think that it's not that great. It's kind of overrated, I think. But also, Flight can be used with like Firebending sometimes, like Korra and Azula. Korra basically fought with him in the sky while they were both pretty much flying. So I don't think it's super powerful. I think it does give you an element of fighting that not many other people have ever had, so that could be pretty good. I think it's at least B tier, probably above Seismic Sense, but I think Lightning could take out a airbender pretty fast just because of how fast it is. It could reach them even in the air. Same for Combustion Bending. Next up we've got Healing. Healing's never really used mid-fight, but I think that is a really cool use for it that we've never really seen. Like I think if you get hit by a blast or something and then heal yourself really fast, that could be super useful. So I think the potential of healing is really high, but we haven't really seen it. All we've really seen it is after fights it gets used. I think the potential is really high and it could be probably B tier. Probably more useful than Flight or Seismic Sense. So we'll put it above those. Alright, next up we've got Swamp Bending. We only really see it used in the Siege of the Fire Nation and in the Swamp episode, but Team Avatar has a really hard time against it because it can basically repair itself super fast. Also, the Fire Nation had a hard time attacking it because it can just pretty much repair itself and it's hard to figure out where to hit it, but you do need a bunch of vines for it, so that's kind of not very useful. I think it's on the same level as like mud bending and sand bending kind of, but probably at the top end of that. C tier. Next up we got Ice Bending. It could be argued that Ice Bending is actually super strong and you could just freeze someone forever. You could also just put someone underground with Earth Bending and then never bring them up and then they're just dead. But we never see that used, so we're not going to take that into account. But I think if you wanted to, those would be really strong ways to just instantly kill someone forever. Ice Bending, I think it's pretty strong. It's kind of like Mud Bending is, like how you can bend liquids as an Earth Bender and how you can bend solids as a Water Bender. So I think it's probably on the same level as mud bending, maybe a bit higher though because it's like sharp and you can form it to how you want it to be. So I think just above mud bending is good. Last sub bending skill we have is blood bending. Definitely S tier, and it's also used by Mon to take away people's bending by blocking the chi paths, I'm pretty sure. So if you take that into consideration, it's just even levels above anything else. You can just disable any opponent instantly pretty much, and there's nothing anyone can really do to fight against it other than I think the Avatar or another bloodbender. Like we see Katara fight against it with Hama, and we see Korra fight against it with Amon, but those are the only times we really see someone fight against bloodbending. It seems pretty hard to do that otherwise. So yeah, I think bloodbending is kind of just by far the best form of bending. Next up we've got energy bending. So this can only be used by Aang and Korra because Lion Turtle gave Aang the power of energy bending because Lion Turtles originally were the ones that had it and they could give bending to people through energy bending. So that's why Aang and Korra are able to take it away and give it back to people, like how Korra gives it back to the people who lost their bending from Amon. So that's kind of similar to blood bending. I think it is a bit weaker though because you can't control someone, you can only just take away or give them bending. But like Aang did with Ozai, he basically just disabled Ozai instantly, but it does seem like you have to have really strong willpower. So it's similar to blood bending, just a little weaker, I think. So we'll put it at the top of A tier. So that's all the forms of sub-bending. Now we're on to the main 4 elements. We'll start off with air because I think it's by far the weakest element and people don't really seem to believe that, but I do think that it has the least amount of uses by far. Like it has no forms of sub-bending that are actually strong. It only has spirit projection and flight on its own isn't good. It's only good when used with airbending. Everything else can pretty much be used on its own and is powerful in its own ways, but air really has nothing going for it. You can't really damage someone with it either. You can just kind of blow them around or run away. So I think it is definitely by far the weakest element. I think it's probably C tier, and that might be controversial, but I really don't think air is that good. One thing that can be argued is Zahir is able to kill people by sucking the air out of their lung and then like creating a vacuum around their head. And there's also a theory that Gyatso did the same thing to kill all those firebenders around him by sucking the air out of the room. That's not confirmed, and Zahir's the only one we've seen do that. I think probably just because he has lower morals, that actually might boost it up a lot. Because like with ice bending or Earthbending, you can kind of do the same thing if you just have no morals and just want to instantly kill them. So I think those are equally as good. We'll bump air up a little bit just because it does have that option if you need to kill someone like that. I think we'll just put it right below lightning. A lightning bender could still just kill an airbender just by instantly shooting it at them, and it'd be just as lethal. Yeah, we'll keep air in B tier. Next up, we'll go to firebending. I think it's better than airbending. It's kind of just the same thing, but more destructive. You have to kind of charge lightning and combustion bending, so you don't really have to do that with fire. So it's definitely above those. Against metal bending, I think that's a pretty good matchup. I do think it's probably weaker than lava bending because it's just way less hot and less destructive. I think it's probably better than metal bending though, on its own. So we'll put fire in A tier. Next up, we've got earth bending. Earthbending is really strong. I think it's the second strongest element. So earthbending has 5 forms of subbending that go along with it, and waterbending has 7 forms of subbending. So waterbending is the strongest, I think, but earthbending, not stronger than energy bending, but it is more versatile than lava bending. There's just a lot more you can do with it. So I think top of A tier, just under energy bending, is a good spot for earth. And then water, just having the amount of subbending skills that it does have, is just really overpowered. So I think we'll put it just below energy bending, because with blood bending and energy bending, you can both take away someone's bending, and I think that's probably one of the strongest skills in all of Avatar. But yeah, that's the end of the tier list. Let me know if you would disagree with any of my takes, or let me know if you agree with any of my rankings. I hope you enjoy the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.